On December 5, 2024, at a Kroger grocery store in downtown Savannah, Georgia, the peaceful afternoon in the neighborhood was suddenly shattered by a group of mischievous teenagers. Not only were they causing a commotion, but they also played the starring role in a bold act of vandalism, breaking wine bottles, playing with the furniture, and showing complete disregard for the customers around them. When the police were called in to intervene, the situation quickly escalated from a simple warning to an on-the-job training session for the teens on how to face reality. And that's when their lesson began. On an ordinary afternoon at the grocery store, no one expected the wine aisle to turn into the stage for a group of rowdy teenagers. The neatly arranged wine bottles became targets in their mischievous antics, with the sound of glass shattering echoing as the bottles hit the floor. But it didn't stop there. The group decided to test out the furniture, as if they were participating in a sofa quality review program, sitting and laughing as though everything around them was just a game. In another corner of the store, an employee witnessed this scene and could only sigh before quickly calling the police. When the officers arrived, they were faced with a scene that one officer described as a cross between a failed party and a TikTok filming session. One officer whispered to his colleague, "Looks like the daycare forgot to pick these kids up." When asked to leave the store, the teenagers showed no remorse. Instead, they shrugged nonchalantly and responded with a familiar rebellious phrase, "We didn't do anything wrong." Some even seemed disgruntled, as if they were the victims in this situation. This reaction only made the officers more tired, but they continued to stay calm, hoping that a gentle reminder would be enough to end the chaos. As the officers tried to make sense of the situation, one of them couldn't resist making a sharp remark, "Y'all got parents? Or are you just a rogue band of furniture abusers?" The comment, delivered with a perfect blend of frustration and sarcasm, drew an indignant response from the teens. Their reply: a chorus of unintelligible mumbles, exaggerated sighs, and Olympic-level eye rolls. It was the kind of defiance that only teenagers could muster, half-hearted rebellion paired with a complete lack of a viable escape plan. One particularly bold teen decided to take things further. Climbing onto a table, he crossed his legs in a meditative pose and proclaimed, "I ain't moving unless you prove I did something." It was a bizarre mix of courtroom bravado and playground logic. Meanwhile, his friends nodded approvingly, as though he had just delivered the closing argument in a high-stakes legal drama. The officers, clearly not in the mood for theatrics, tried to maintain their composure. "Listen, this isn't a debate club. Either you cooperate, or you're leaving in cuffs," one officer warned, his patience wearing thin. But to the teens, this wasn't a routine intervention. It was an unscripted episode of Teens versus the System. Imaginary lawyers were summoned, mock objections raised, and one teen dramatically whispered to his friend, "They can't arrest us if we don't talk." Despite the officers' attempts to de-escalate the situation with firm but reasonable warnings, the teens treated it like a game of chicken. The officers, armed with authority and growing exasperation, found themselves at a crossroads. Should they engage further in negotiations with the self-proclaimed table lawyer, or begin preparing for what was inevitably coming? The clock was ticking, and the teens showed no signs of relenting, their rebellious energy fueling a standoff that was as absurd as it was inevitable. Throughout the ordeal, the officers' expressions remained stoic, a testament to their training. But if you looked closely, you might catch a faint twitch of an eyebrow, the universal sign of an adult wondering how they ended up babysitting a group of overconfident teenagers on a mission to argue with reality itself. When verbal persuasion failed completely, one teen decided to escalate by taking physical action, leaving everyone stunned. He dramatically flopped down onto a sofa like a Shakespearean actor in a tragedy. With a lazy demeanor and a touch of defiance, he declared, "No one can arrest me just because I'm sitting down." His friends, not missing a beat, immediately rallied to support the victim. They shouted slogans as if in a protest, "This is unjust. Freedom for the sofa." The atmosphere became both absurd and chaotic, with all their excuses being utterly nonsensical yet delivered with such seriousness that it was almost comical. On the police side, one officer approached with a calm expression but a weary gaze. He knelt to handcuff the teen, but not before muttering a heartfelt sigh, "I really don't get paid enough for this." Though his words seemed humorous, the tone revealed his frustration with the reckless behavior of the teens. As other officers tried to maintain order and call for cooperation, the situation only worsened. Some of the teens began moving around, creating chaos as if they were trying to distract the police. One pretended to search for something on the floor, while another complained that the handcuffs were hurting his wrists, even though he hadn't been cuffed yet. The scene looked like a stage where two sides, the police and the teens, were engaging in a tense game. But to the adults involved, it was no longer a joke. It was a concerning sign of how some young people were losing their sense of respect for the law and personal responsibility. After relentless efforts, including lectures on the importance of respecting public property, the officers finally managed to escort the group of teens outside. However, the story didn't end there. One teen, with a defiant attitude, insisted that he wouldn't leave until he found his lucky bracelet, which had supposedly gone missing in the chaos. "It's more important to me than anything here," he insisted, ignoring the weary looks from the officers. The seriousness with which he spoke made one officer sigh. "If I find that bracelet, it better be a national treasure." Not to be outdone, another teen stood in the middle of the parking lot, shouting at the top of his lungs, "Where's my phone charger?" loud enough for the entire neighborhood to hear. He acted as if the Kroger store was responsible for safeguarding customers' personal belongings, prompting an officer to interrupt. "We're here to deal with the chaos, not to find lost items." As a few others were escorted out, small side stories began to emerge. One teen, instead of cooperating, insisted his shoelaces were untied and needed to be fixed right there on the spot. Another teen, seemingly unaware of the gravity of the situation, demanded that food delivery be called because "I haven't eaten in hours." The officers tried to remain calm, but the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Every bizarre request and stubborn resistance from the group made one officer joke to a colleague, "I swear next time I'll bring a lost and found list." In the end, the teens were escorted out, but not before putting on an elaborate spectacle, as if they were starring in a reality TV show. The chaos of the scene not only intensified the officers' fatigue, but also left a lasting impression on the onlookers, making many wonder if they had accidentally walked into an unintentional comedy show. As tensions escalated faster than an officer's heartbeat trying to keep his cool, backup units arrived on the scene. The sound of police sirens intensified the already chaotic atmosphere. However, this didn't cause the teens to back down. One of them even sarcastically exclaimed, "What's this? The Avengers!" The remark made the officers briefly raise an eyebrow, while his companions burst into laughter as if this were an impromptu comedy performance. However, the humor didn't last long. With stern faces, the officers continued with their duties. One by one, the teens were escorted out, but not without maintaining their defiant attitudes. Some stood there with their arms crossed as if auditioning for a reality TV show. The defiant glares, constant complaints, and baseless objections showed that this group was doing everything possible to prolong their dramatic act. Meanwhile, the supporting officers worked in coordination to ensure things didn't spiral out of control. A young officer couldn't hide his exhaustion as he muttered, "It's like dealing with a mobile circus crew." Yet, with professionalism and patience, they gradually brought the situation under control. It seemed as though each teen wanted to be the star of the afternoon, oblivious to the fact that this time the spotlight was the flashing red and blue lights of the police car. From a distance, this situation was both absurd and bittersweet, as these kids failed to realize their antics were leading them into real trouble. The officers, although stern, still hoped to resolve everything without having to add anyone to the handcuffed list. But with the group's increasingly defiant behavior, that hope began to fade. The situation reached its dramatic peak when one particularly defiant teen, eager to assert their innocence, inadvertently escalated the tension. While waving their arms in animated protest, they accidentally elbowed an officer in the chest. The officer immediately exclaimed, "Battery on an officer!" At this, The teen's eyes widened with a mix of confusion and indignation. "Battery? What battery? I didn't even charge my phone today," they retorted, clearly misunderstanding the accusation and turning the moment into an unintentional punchline. The scene, both absurd and chaotic, captured the surreal nature of the confrontation. Body cam footage later confirmed the contact, yet the teen clung to their narrative of being the victim. "This is unfair," they shouted, alternating between claims of innocence and dramatic proclamations of police overreach. Their friends, sensing an opportunity for group solidarity, began echoing variations of "he didn't do nothing" and "this is messed up." A chorus of denial that only added to the officers' mounting frustration. Despite the undeniable evidence, the teen doubled down on their defense, treating the incident as if it were a misunderstanding rather than a physical altercation. Their steadfast refusal to acknowledge the seriousness of the situation highlighted a disconnect between their perception of authority and the reality of their actions. The officers, however, were less amused. "The body cam doesn't lie," one muttered, while the teen continued to argue, seemingly unaware that their quip about charging a phone was destined to become the most memorable and ironic moment of the encounter. This scene underscored the delicate balance officers must maintain when handling juveniles, navigating between the comedic absurdities of youthful ignorance and the serious implications of physical resistance against law enforcement. Even as the sound of handcuffs clicked into place and police cars were already parked to take them away, some teens stubbornly clung to their childish yet dramatic resistance. "You're ruining my vibe," one group member shouted, as if being arrested was just a minor disruption to their afternoon entertainment. Another voiced a deeper concern, dramatically screaming, "You're ruining my future." These complaints didn't surprise the officers, but they still tried to remain calm, gently explaining, "Your future will be brighter if you don't start by breaking wine bottles in stores." However, this message didn't seem to resonate with any of them. Instead of reflecting on their poor choices, the teens got caught up in a debate about whether the handcuffs were too tight and didn't fit their style. While some officers were exhausted but still maintaining their professionalism, a few couldn't help but think, "This is why I don't teach high school." The tug-of-war between the police and the group of teens resembled an endless comedy skit, where every reminder from the officers was met with illogical excuses or overly dramatic complaints. The contrast between the seriousness of law enforcement and the carefree attitude of the teens created a situation that was both tense and amusing. For the officers, it was about maintaining public order, but for the teens, it seemed like just another game they weren't ready to end. They didn't realize that with each moment they continued to resist, the legal consequences grew larger, a valuable lesson they would soon learn. In this passage, John, the narrator of the video, shares his reflections on the challenges officers face when dealing with rebellious teens. He doesn't just describe the difficulty of the job, but also addresses deeper issues related to the education and behavior of today's youth. The story John tells about his experience during a school truancy sweep helped him realize that these kids, although young, can exhibit aggressive behavior and need to be held accountable for their actions. John recounts a situation where a teen argued and even swung their arm to strike him when he tried to intervene. This wasn't the first time John faced such tense situations, but it was an important lesson for him. John realized that although these kids might simply be acting out of ignorance and rebellion, they still need to be taught discipline and responsibility. They need to understand that their actions have real consequences, and freedom doesn't mean acting without thought or self-control. John also highlights an important point. Perhaps today's youth are overly influenced by action movies, where protagonists always triumph by rebelling and breaking the rules. However, in real life, rebellion doesn't always lead to good outcomes. The truth is, when a teen chooses to resist the police, the result is often not a heroic victory as portrayed in films, but serious legal consequences. Therefore, John not only calls for education on responsibility, but also emphasizes that effective and appropriate interventions from family and society can help teens understand the value of respecting the law and taking responsibility for their actions. Through this, John's message is clear. A combination of discipline, guidance from family, and responsible education will be the key to helping teens develop in a healthy and sustainable way. Only when kids are equipped with the right life skills and a proper understanding of their behavior can they avoid tense situations and steer clear of antisocial actions. With over 430,000 juveniles arrested in 2020, this statistic is not just a number, but a serious warning about the growing issue of youth crime. It indicates that behavioral problems and criminal activity among teenagers are no longer isolated incidents but have become a global issue that needs to be addressed. Furthermore, with nearly 800,000 cases being processed through juvenile courts every year, it is clear that many teens still fail to recognize the consequences of their wrong actions, even viewing resisting arrest as a game or an act of rebellion. This is particularly concerning when we consider the relationship between youth and the law. This act of resisting not only shows disrespect towards law enforcement, but also reflects a lack of understanding about the legal consequences they will face. This is not just an individual behavior, but a sign of a failing education and family system that is not guiding young people properly. These statistics highlight the urgent need for stronger, more effective solutions to mitigate this issue, from educating youth about societal values to reforming the juvenile legal system. At the conclusion of the story, the narrator not only presented dry statistics but also made a heartfelt plea for change in how we raise and educate our children. He emphasized, "Our kids are worth the effort," a powerful reminder that every child, even if they make mistakes, still deserves attention and guidance from their families, communities, and society. This call to action is not just about increasing rehabilitation programs for teens, but also about emphasizing the importance of early intervention programs to prevent criminal behavior from forming at a young age. Additionally, the narrator reminded us that the juveniles arrested in this case are presumed innocent until proven guilty in court, despite the clear evidence of broken bottles. This serves as a reminder of the fundamental principle in the legal system where everyone is entitled to protection and fair trial. However, through this situation, the narrator also raised a bigger issue. How can we help children understand the value of respect and discipline without making them feel abandoned or alienated by society? From the story of the arrested teens, we can draw an important lesson about responsibility, discipline, and the significance of educating the younger generation. First, each mistake made by youth not only reflects a lack of awareness, but is also the result of inadequate guidance and concern from their families and society. Raising children is not just the responsibility of parents, but of the entire community. To reduce juvenile crime, we must focus on teaching values, respect, and accountability for one's actions from an early age. The second lesson is about facing the consequences and respecting the law. The teens in this story chose to resist and create difficulties for law enforcement, but such behavior not only disrupts order but could lead to serious consequences in the future. Understanding the legal system and the consequences of their actions will help these young individuals develop a better understanding of society. Finally, we must also recognize that while the behavior of these juveniles may be wrong, they still deserve to be treated fairly and given the opportunity to learn and improve. Rehabilitation programs, rather than punishment, can help them reintegrate into society and become responsible citizens. The biggest lesson is that every child deserves the chance to change and grow, as long as we provide them with the tools and support they need.